order at 6:02 p.m. for this special meeting of the PGUSD Board of Education. And we are starting right now, I guess, with our call to order. So we do our normal.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, land acknowledgement first. And this is perfect timing. Thank you. Thank you. Call to order was this. So I will start with our land acknowledgement. Good evening. As we begin this meeting, it's important to pay respect to and acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Ohlone, Costanoan, and Esselen people, and additionally pay respect to elders both past and present. And now we will move on to the roll call vote. Thank you, Trustee McNary.
President Dr. Hazen.
Here.
Clerk McNary.
Here.
Trustee Otmar.
Here.
Trustee Shamaz.
Here.
And Trustee Wax.
Here. So our next item is the adoption of the agenda, and it's a very short agenda tonight, which is good because we're here for our board governance training and self-evaluation, see how we're doing, and hopefully grow together as a board further. Our next item then is to get public comment on our agenda. Seeing no one in the room and no one online as well. Makes that easy. Any board discussion about the adoption of the agenda? And would this be a good time for comments as well that we wanted to get board comments to do regarding the agenda, or should we do that once we break for the item A? Okay.
Just as a point of order, and I'm just noticing now that we don't have board member comments on our agenda. So I can say personally, I wasn't prepared for that this evening.
Any other thoughts on the agenda? Do we want to open up an opportunity for that? Do we want to use it as part of our board discussion here?
I'm okay to open it up, and anyone that doesn't have a comment doesn't need to make one if everybody is on board with that. I would like to move that we amend the agenda to include board comment. Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so the motion was made by Trustee Otmar and seconded by Trustee Shamaz to add a board comment at I assume immediately following the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll say, right before we get into information discussion item A. So can I get all in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So that passes 5-0 with that amendment. So now we're on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Eric, could I get you to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you wouldn't mind, from your old superintendent days? Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Okay. With that, we'll move on now to our amended item. Just a quick opportunity for board comment. If there was anyone on the board, and I don't know, Superintendent Adamson, if you wanted to add something as well to state tonight, or happy to start off with you since that's part of our normal.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And yes, I do have just a few, words and comments, and I've actually prepared something to just read out loud this evening in just response to, some of the recent reaching outs that have occurred. And I feel the timing is appropriate, and I'd like to just use this forum to share it. A version of this is something I intend to share with our community in the coming days as well. And I feel it's particularly important given our community engagement event that's coming up on Wednesday evening. So I'm going to go ahead and just share. Over the past few days, families and staff have shared their concerns with me and members of our staff about growing uncertainty in our community regarding potential changes to our country's immigration policies. As your superintendent, I want to assure all of our families that our schools remain safe spaces of learning where every student belongs and has the opportunity to thrive. Our commitment to protecting and supporting all students, regardless of their background or circumstances, stands firm and unchanging. Tonight, I reaffirm our district's unwavering commitment to our core values of safety, belonging, and prosperity for all students. In Pacific Grove Unified, we take pride in our culture of we, a principle that goes far beyond simple coexistence. It means wrapping our arms around each other, supporting one another, and refusing to tolerate incidents of racism, discrimination, bullying, or exclusion of any kind. These are the exact same words that I used in my opening video to our entire community at the beginning of the year, and it's the exact same words that I refer to now tonight. We fully intend to continue to uphold these values and maintain our schools as welcoming spaces where all students can learn and grow together. This is not just our legal obligation, but it's also a moral imperative and the foundation of our district's mission. With this in mind, I ask everyone to join me tonight and in the coming weeks in our recommitment to our pledge, a pledge that is posted and visible in every space and place across the district, and one that boldly proclaims all students who come through our doors will do so with the right and the full expectation of experiencing these three core values of belonging, safety, and prosperity. Whatever challenges lie ahead, please know that we stand prepared to meet them with resiliency and unity and remain committed to preserving the trust that our families and students place in us every day, allowing every student to feel safe, valued, and supported in their pursuit of education and opportunity.
Thank you very much for that. And I'll open up to the board. I will start with a very short message that I'd like to read as on behalf of the PGUSD school board, but as myself, I also want to reaffirm the message that was just read by Superintendent Adamson for our unwavering commitment to creating safe, inclusive, and welcoming environment for every student, regardless of their background, identity, or circumstances. In these uncertain times, it is essential that our schools stand as places of safety, understanding, and respect for all, including our immigrant, LGBTQ+, and other students who may, for just reason, feel vulnerable. Every child deserves the opportunity to learn without bullying, fear, discrimination, or prejudice. And I believe that my colleagues on the board will continue to prioritize these policies and practices, meeting up with a culture of we that protect and uplift our students, ensuring their voices are heard and they feel welcomed. How we support them will ultimately prove to be foundational, as they are our future leaders. So together as a district, we will work to continue to build the strong, compassionate, and safe community where every student feels they truly belong. So I will open up to other folks on the board if there's additional comments, and again, no worries if not, since it was not on the original agenda. But go to you next, Vice President McNary.
Well, thank you for adding that, and thank you, Dr. Adamson, for your statement and for your words, President Hazen. It's timely. I mean, we can't avoid what's going on in the rest of the world and not speak to it, and especially when we sit in these roles. So thank you for that reminder, and thank you for your commitment to all of our students. And I stand with both of you in the district, and it's going to be tough, and there's going to be a lot of difficult things, but I think we're going to get through this together. So thanks.
Trustee Shalasi.
Yeah, thank you for that. My one comment is that we are required by law to school without regard to immigration status, where we can't even know what their status is. So that's our charge, and that's what I think we have to always be aware of. And to me, it's all about the parents of those that are impacted, that I hope that we can somehow give some kind of reassurance to.
Trustee Watts.
I appreciate everyone's words, and with my own self support, everyone. Just trying to think of the uncertainty of what's happening in the country or might happen in the country is kind of daunting for me personally. But besides our charge with educating every student, besides impacting the families and the actual students, a scenario where people get taken out of the school with other kids around would be horribly traumatic if your friend got taken away or anything. So I think we have to keep all the students and what we want to be as a society in focus wherever we fall on how we approach some issues. Yeah, I hope we'll get through this together and with strength.
Thank you. Trustee Otmar, please.
I don't think I could add much more than what's already been said. I'm grateful for everyone that has spoken. I'm grateful for everything that you've said. I stand behind that. I know there's no such thing as 1,000%, so I'll say 100%. But I feel as deeply as you all do. And yeah, I don't think there's much more to say than that.
I think that's a perfect example from each of us that we're about to enter into board governance training and self-evaluation, how we come together on an issue, whether we agree fully or disagree, and recognize the importance of what's placed at our feet on a daily, if not twice a month basis. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and move us on to item A, board governance training and self-evaluation. I think I'll hand it back over to you, Dr. Adamson, right, to lead us on this.
Well, yes, thank you for that. And I do want to point out this is our first coming together as a new board for our first governance training. We did several of these last year, but how exciting that, we get to just, I think, talking about commitment so much already this evening, right? Our commitment to one another as a governance team on how we are going to work together, how we are going to make decisions, come to consensus, and in particular, come to consensus when, right, sometimes we may not more necessarily agree about a particular topic, right? And so that's board governance. And so it's my pleasure to have with us this evening our two trainers who've been with us for this journey, definitely for the past year, who I'm so grateful to for sharing their expertise and insight. And so I'm really going to go ahead and hand it over to Dr. Eric Andrews and Attorney Lou Lozano. So thank you both for being here this evening.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so very much. We're so glad to be back with you. Just a brief introduction for those of you who not know my background. I'm Eric Andrew. I work with Leadership Associates, been there for now 8 years. I retired from the Campbell Union School District where I was superintendent for 7.5 years. And that's kind of my background. Lou, did you want to add anything about who you are and why?
I can say that it's an honor for me to be here and an honor for me to work with Eric, who I've known since he went to Campbell and work with him there. He's an outstanding superintendent and a great man. So love coming here and working with you. So it's a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
It really is. And it's one of the things I was talking to Clerk McNeary about that, saying that I don't like board governance workshops. I'll just put it out there, I don't. And so I usually don't. And I only choose places where I want to be. And this is always a place where I want to be. You guys are a great, great, great board. And I'm so glad to meet you and to work with you as well. I know you've been a part of this. So what we're going to be doing tonight are several things. One, the biggest thing we're going to be doing is going over the handbook. 6 of you have been participants in revising the handbook, and it's something that we recommend that you do on a regular basis because conditions change. Board members change. And one of the things that we do know is that anytime you have a new board member, you have a new team. So happy that you talked about the importance of team. And so we're going to go through the handbook. But before we do that, we're going to do a few other things, such as we want you to express why you ran for the boards. We're going to do a why exercise. And what's going to be important about that is for us to hear collectively, individually and collectively. There's a phrase I like to use, and it's called, can you become independent, interdependent, and dependent on one another? And that's what a good team is. It doesn't take away from you having your own individualistic aspects and things, but how are you going to be interdependent and dependent on your colleagues to do what's great for kids? And one of the things I want to really emphasize that all of you talked about kids after the sentence was read, and that's very, very important to hear that, and we're really pleased with that. Once there are going to be items we're not going to be able to get to, and we'll have a parking lot. And what that basically means is we'll put that on the side. Doesn't mean that they're forgotten. It just means that at another time we'll be able to get to them so that they aren't lost in the richness of the conversations along the way. We're going to also talk about the Brown Act, and we'll go through some exercises with you to give you some scenarios. And in some cases, there are no right answers. In some cases, there are definitive right answers where the law says no, this is a violation. But you'll get a chance to practice going through various scenarios, some that some of you may have experienced not only as a school board member, but in your other businesses as well, to say that, wow, when we did this, was this a violation or not? So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll have an exercise from the book Trust and Inspire by Stephen Covey Jr. Great book. And the superintendent is going to take you through that exercise, and as well as Lou's going to talk a little bit about board member liabilities, which are important for you to know, and understanding how well, what are the areas that you're covered as a member of a school board, and what areas are you kind of out there on your own along the way. Anything else, Lou?
You can see we have a pretty ambitious agenda tonight. At the same time, we recognize that you've all been working today, and we don't want to, if we start getting blurry-eyed, any of us, we might want to say, let's continue this in a discussion. We're thinking of going until 9 at a reasonable pace. But if any time somebody says, my brain is full and I need to go, please feel free to say that. So we respect your personal needs. Yeah. Okay. I think you can handle a little bit more. Yeah, you can handle a little bit more. So with that, let's jump into the why. Why? Let's go around the table and find out what drove you to be a board member. Why are you on this school board? And we can either start someplace, or somebody wants to just start it, the discussion.
I'll jump in if it's okay, just to help kickstart a bit. Is that, for me, I've spent a good bit of my life complaining, as probably a lot of us have. And I realized that if I was going to be in that role of complaining and wanting things to change, as a result of various elections in the past, maybe say about 8 years ago, I realized I needed to put myself out there and do something. And so that's what really inspired me to run. As I had worked with the PTA, I'd worked with site councils, and had some changes I thought would be important for our district. And so I basically said now is a good time to put my money where my mouth is, and ran for the school board to try to help implement some of those changes rather than just complaining.
Thank you for that.
We can go around the table. That's fine.
I'm not calling on folks this one.
That's all good. Thank you. I think we have a great district. And I think my hope and love for the district and for all kids in general is probably why I ran. And wanting all kids to have a place where they feel seen and safe and can access their education and see success in whatever way, shape, or form that comes. Yeah, I do love being on the school board. I don't know, that may be like a odd thing to say, all things considered, but I love this work and I think it's important. And yeah.
Well, I was thinking about why did I first run? And that was an interesting time. My kids graduated, well, most of my kids graduated in 95, but I ran and got elected in 97. And at the time, it was this crazy recall movement. Everybody was all upset. The superintendent that was here was causing problems in some people's eyes. And so I don't know why. I mean, I decided to run. I enjoy the idea of it, and my kids got a good education, and so, and I'm a teacher, so I felt like, okay, I know this business. And so when I got elected along with two other people, and I didn't know anybody, even though I'm born and raised in PG, but I've been away, and so I didn't know who the players were. And I soon found out, but but it was such a amazing, when you look back on it, time of learning on how to be a team when you have people that are really not okay with each other. And the recall did not happen because the two people that were going to be recalled decided to just not run again. So it kind of evened that out. But still, you had all this energy, and yet you still had that superintendent that half of the board didn't like. And I was like in the middle. I didn't have any way. I wasn't for or against. I liked the superintendent actually, but what did I know? So, I mean, he was a good superintendent. I thought, he was smart, but he was ruffling feathers because they wanted to close the school. So that was, how that goes. So anyway, but I totally enjoyed my time on the board, and I love being on the school board. And so we went through some really tough times in terms of coming together as a board. But we did it, and I was always so proud of that. Like, wow, like, if I can be a board member with this person who I really mostly don't agree with on so many things, and yet we could come together and respect each other and work together. And so anyway, I stayed for 12 years. And I might have stayed longer, except I had to move out of the district at the end of my time. So that's how come I went off the board. And then after I retired, I just started going back to board meetings to see, oh, what's going on? Let me check in on everybody. And then it just so happened that Carolyn said, hey, I'm not running again. And do you want to run? Because now we're in a little district, trustee area. And I said, yeah, I do. Here I am.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Who's watching? No, I, excuse me. I think I've said this before, so pardon repeating myself, but it's new to you. My parents always stressed the importance of good public schools. That's why we chose to settle down in Arizona where we did. And so we are all raised in public schools. And then we partially chose PG because of the public schools. And I truly feel like it's a good public education system is the foundation for a great city. And then a good public education system nationwide is pivotal in so many areas. I feel like, there could be so many smarter ways to do things in the country, at a job, whatever, if we had a better education system. So I feel really committed to bringing everyone up. And much like Trustee Shamas, I live in an area that is part of the new district, and I had some free time. And I have two kids, and they're going to be in the district for a long time. So both selfishly and selfishly for my community, I want to do the best that I can in making sure that everyone has a great education and that we do right.
So initially I ran for school board. Well, I was on site council. I have two kids in the district, and both my kids have allergies, anaphylactic allergies, which is why I became so involved up front. I'm an involved person anyway, but that definitely spurred me to get involved on site council and just be involved in all the events that were happening at the school. And Carolyn Swanson also said, hey. So I ran for the school board because I really did feel like I could make not necessarily a difference, but I could be someone that could give my opinion, and that's a steady opinion. I'm honest, I'm upfront. I know that I'm highly empathetic and nurturing and caring. And I feel like who better to be on a school board than somebody that actually truly cares and loves and wants what's best for kids. Now that I'm on the school board, my reason for being here has changed 1,000 times. You know, you sign up for something and you think you're here for one purpose, and it turns out that that purpose is not really why you're here at all. And do I know what my purpose is now? No, I just know that I'm going to lead with my heart, and I'm going to do what feels right. I'm going to listen to the community. I'm going to put kids first, and that's all that really matters is kids. And so this is a hard job. I can't say that I love it. Because it's difficult, and it's difficult to balance motherhood and a full-time job, and this full-time job, especially when I care so deeply about it. But it's definitely worth the work. And, you know, sometimes you get a peek behind the curtain and you go, oh, you know, it's not what you expected. And that isn't to say that it's bad behind the curtain. It's just so intricate and detailed. And I think sometimes people look at the school board and think, oh, they just show up for meetings, and how simple, but it sits with you, and you know, I mean, it just becomes a part of who you are. So that was long-winded, but my reasons will probably continue to change and evolve as I sit here for the rest of my term. So that's that.
I think there's a common theme among all of you, and that is you've all ran for the board to make a great school district better. That you all want to see it improve, you all want to see it succeed, and that's all the right reasons to be here. You know, you're not here because you are looking to make sure your child gets Mrs. X or Mr. Y as their teacher. You're here to make sure that every kid gets what they deserve, and that's the best possible education that you can give them. And I can tell you from experience that our firm represents half of the 1,100 school districts in California in some capacity. And you are remarkable. You are among the top districts out there. You really are. And you have a gem here that I am impressed that you all want to polish even more. And there is no perfection, but we can make it better. And by your stewardship. So.
And that's so important. I love the idea of caring, because you all really do care about this district as well as the community. Another thing that I did hear about, and being able to weave the importance of how a school district is a part of the community and what your role is. You mentioned, Laura, the role changes all the time. You're not kidding, because the topics change all the time. And there's this thing that I have that says there's always a story. There's a story behind the story, and there's a story behind the story behind the story. And that's the only people who know that story is the governance team. So your public may think they have a story out there, and you realize, no, there's so many layers behind, yes, that's out there and that you're aware of, which is why it's important to have a handbook. And when as you're talking and understanding what your legal rights are, and how do you continue to function as a governance team? That's extremely important. And when you get to those points, and I never want any of you to give up on the reasons why you ran, because they are absolutely the right reasons to be here. Absolutely the right reasons to be here. Lou is correct. You are an outstanding board. You really are. And I know where your heart is, and that because of your heart's work, you're going to be okay. It's just important to have a foundation of how do we interact as a board when things are going, aren't going as well. But also, how do we celebrate when things are going well? Because there's a lot more opportunities and a lot more things that are going well in a district like this that aren't going well. So I don't want you to dwell so much on some of the negative things that you forget. We're doing some good work for kids. We're doing some good work for our community. So the handbook, the 900 policies, the Brown Act are really the things that you want to hold on to. And we spent a lot of time last year looking at how do we process, how do we interact with each other, how do we ensure that we are following not only what you said as a governance team, but what the law says from a board policy to other statutes along the way. So we're going to review that. For some of you, it will be a review. I am going to rely on a lot of you because there are going to be areas that, to be frank with you, I may not remember the story behind the story behind the story in terms of how we got there. And some of you will remember those aspects of it. So this is going to be very interactive, and that's our intent. So let's
The
go.
more interactive it is, the richer it will be for all of you. Because it's really your district and you are the board members. And part of the theme that we're having here is going from I to we without losing me. How do you are individuals, and the decision making that you make will reflect your community. You are not rubber stamps, you are individuals. So you express your personal views on issues that come in front of you, and you collectively decide that as part of the we. But once you've made the decision, you're all behind it, regardless of where you started out. You're all behind it. And that's what's going to make your district so successful.
So let's go through the handbook itself. We'll just do some highlights and we're going to go from there. I'm sorry. The handbook itself. I think it'll be up on the screen. Yeah. Yep.
That's good.
Copy as well.
I'm okay with the screen copy. Thank you.
No, thank you.
And so if you take a look at the table of contents that we have there, we're going to go through, we won't go through each and every section, but we will highlight most of the sections along the way. So I'm going to work with our trustee friend, Lewis, who will help guide me as well as us in the process. I'd like to start with the preamble. I think that's important work as we think about what are the foundational reasons why you have to have a governance statement and what your role is. And it says, preamble, representative government requires that public office holders be competent, independent, impartial, and accountable. Therefore, the trustees of the Pacific Grove Unified School District adopts this governance handbook, which is a companion to its policy manual, to promote and maintain best practices and the highest standards of professional conduct. Norms and protocols flow from the board bylaws, embody the principles promulgated by the California School Boards Association, and are based on the collective experience of school boards across the state. This ready resource formalizes the conventions used by the governance team in the conduct of the day-to-day business. So this is what we will always refer to. And one of the things I really love working about you guys, someone always says, but the bylaws or the handbook says we should do it this way. So anytime you're in a bind or anytime you feel as though, how should we proceed? Go to the handbook, because typically there's a space in there where that's worked. The other reason why I want to bring you guys along, or for I want some of those of you who are part of it, is because context matters. There's a reason why some of these things were put in, not just the legal reasons, but what makes it unique to Pacific Grove. And there are conversations that were had, as we said, that some of you are really strong in your beliefs that I think we should do it this way. And we were able to get to some consensus with those types of things. Questions or talks about just the preamble itself?
Just one quick one is, and I think the answer is not this time, but how much are we digging into this to try to rewrite or edit? This is more an understanding session, and then we'll pick this up in another board governance, right?
Correct. That's the intent. Yes. The intent basically is to go through it because this is going to be your working document from now. I think I mentioned earlier the importance of reviewing it. And maybe, and I'm not sure what the typical timetable is, Louis, maybe you have a better idea of how frequently you should go through it. One of the things you don't necessarily want to do is continue to wordsmith it. You want it to be philosophically, here's where we stand, just what we believe as a group. But typically, which
Yeah, you can do the review in a number of ways. We have two new board members who weren't part of the discussion, but Beth, you sat in on a number of those meetings. Everybody should have a copy and everybody should read it. If there is something in there that you say, well, I don't understand this. I don't know how it's implemented. I'm not sure I agree with it. You should feel free to bring that up at a board meeting for discussion. Okay. So that's one way of doing the review process, is bring your issues, any issues forward. The other possibility is we schedule a meeting sometime towards the end of the year or maybe over the summer when it's a little bit quieter, and having all of you read this and bringing any issues or any revisions you want and having that discussed at another governance type of training. So we can do it in a couple of ways and decide, what's going to work best for you. If there's any urgency, if you read this and say, oh, I don't know if I can buy into that, then that's something you need to bring forward and discuss. Okay. Because the last board meeting, this is a commitment. This is your document. And it's a commitment that each of you are making to the collective, all of you. And it's important that you all say, yes, we subscribe to this. This is how we want to operate and as a governance team. And we believe that this document reflects our values and our principles. Okay. So if there's something that you absolutely can't subscribe to, then bring it up. Let's discuss it. Okay.
yes. And that's one of the reasons when we talked about the parking lot, there may be areas that we look at and think, you know what? It's not something that's biting at me now, but it's something I think I'm not feeling great about. Let's put it in the parking lot and bring it back to have further discussion. And part of the reason for doing it that way is there may require some research by staff, by Lou or someone else, to be able to give you a full answer about that. But we don't want to go through the document and not have you feel as if this is your document is something you can buy into. In fact, one of the things I would recommend would be once we go through this, that you do take some time to go through it, because in the end, we want you to sign off on it. Not necessarily tonight, but we do want you to sign off to say, yes, I can buy into what we said here. There's some things that I may want to tweak. I will bring them up as they rise, or we'll put them in a parking lot, but we want you to be able to say, yeah, I get the general gist. I understand why we're here, and I can buy into this document. So, our trustee Lewis, can we move to our commitments and obligations? Yes.
If I could just add something, and it's interesting too, because as times change, looking back through the bylaws, at minimum annually is going to make a difference, because everything shifts, and what might have felt okay last year may not be okay this year, or some things might not sit quite right this year with changing climates and things like that. So even if we've read it, rereading is probably ideal, just to say, yeah, this still makes sense this year.
And you bring up another good point too, and that is annually CSVASIN's bylaw changes along the way too. And so we want to make sure that you're familiar with your own bylaws, so that when the new bylaws come out, you aren't in conflict with them. Or if you are, you made a conscious decision that we're in conflict with it because we feel this is good for our community. And then Lou will say you can't do that.
Let's figure out how you can get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's the most famous question we always ask Lou. We don't ask Lou, can we? We ask, how can we make this work? Yes, along the way. So I want you to take a look at first of all, our governance team's unity of purpose. Our unity of purpose is to accomplish our mission, fulfill our goals, and to realize our vision as we operate under best practices set forth in policy. That's what you're here for. And if there's an area that boards get in trouble and superintendents get in trouble and districts get in trouble with, it's taking a look at the next section, governance, role, and responsibilities. And Louis, is there a way to blow that up just a bit? Just that section there. Yeah, 1 through 5. There we go. Can you see that or? Okay. So I want you just to take a look at that and then I'll ask for feedback. Thoughts, comments? Thumbs up? You're okay with it? I'll do the Southwest Airlines exit row thing in terms of if you're okay with it, give me a verbal yes. Verbal yes. Or no.
Well, it's very wordy.
Uh-huh.
And all of this is a lot more than back in the day, so I'm not sure that all the wordiness is necessary. I understand how it probably came about that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Okay.
I'm a yes, and I agree with you. I think having this just be clear and succinct for us and for anyone else who takes a look at the handbook would be a nice endeavor to look at. But I think it's bigger than what we can take on for at least tonight's meeting. So yes.
I'll say yes and as well, because, you know, I even was thinking back to when we added, I think we added the not as individuals, for example, again, getting in that idea of the board unity, because it, you know, a lot of this does talk about, and we thought it was never a bad idea to remind both everybody in the community and ourselves as a board that we are not acting as individuals in this interest, we're acting as a board. So that was one, I know that was one of the reasons why it became wordier, but I agree. I like the idea of down the road parking lotting, the idea of throwing it into ChatGPT and cleaning it up.
How about looking at the next section that says, yes, there we go. Yes, we're on a roll, Louis.
What does judicial review pertain to?
Making sure that what we're doing is legal.
Oh.
Anything surprising, anything pretty straightforward, understanding what the role is?
I guess I would add something about it. I mean, it says human resources. I don't know. I think I would want to say something about staff support, or, you know, because yes, it's all about the students, but secondary to that, it's all about teachers and staff that support those students. And I think that we definitely deal with that as quite a bit of our time. So I don't know if human resources really says that. Maybe it's supposed to mean that. I don't know what human resources just mean. It's our domain, meaning we um
When you say staff support, what
Yeah.
are you referring to?
just that we're as concerned for staff morale, I think, as we are, for our students' morale, that sometimes I don't hear stuff about the staff, but I mean, yes, of course, we're here for the students, but the staff they're part of it, they're almost inseparable to me. And I just feel that they and it ends up that we are, if you talk about, well, collective bargaining, but even so, beyond that, we interact a lot with the staff.
I think though, when I look at this, these are board responsibilities and they're clearly defined. And I don't want to create a situation in the board bylaws where it sounds like we are directly supporting staff, because that's not our role. Our role is to support the superintendent. And if we start getting into staff support and all of that, anything beyond human resources, I could see it might get a little bit murky.
And I'll just add a quick, I mean, we originally, when we drafted that last bullet, again, if I'm remembering correctly, that was social, emotional, and physical safety of kids, but we intentionally took out the of kids to represent the entire district. So I think that was our goal in that edit.
I'm just afraid by putting staff, it would get a little like
And
too much in the weeds.
Yeah,
do you know?
I'm not really advocating for staff being something, a bullet on there. I was just not seeing something that maybe reflected that, but now that you're saying social,
Mhm.
emotional, physical safety.
I mean, we could add right. I mean, we could add something, but I think as long as we, again, are as a board recognizing that is the students, I would still, I mean, no, I won't say that, but I would say it's the students and, the district staff are in that last bullet, importantly. It's not just,
Thank you for that, both of you, because, thank you for that, both of you, because this is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. When we talk about context, how do we get here? This is so great question or comment on your part. Great background and feeling. So here's what we were thinking when we said that. And as long as the six of you have that understanding, we can move through it. So thank you so much. This is exactly what we're looking for. Exactly what we're looking for. Limits of board member authority. And basically looking at the 9200s is what we're referring to here.
I have a very minor edit because it's something I already can see something I've violated. So throw me off the board if you need to, but
Okay.
because her position, I'm joking. I'm mostly joking about the last part, but because her position as a board member may inhibit the performance of school personnel, the board member informs. I would like to just say that the board member should inform the superintendent or designee before volunteering in his child's classroom. And I'll bring up an example where, let's say, my wife was the volunteer in the classroom, but then she had a meeting scheduled and I had to fill in for her. I've definitely done that and not sent a message to you first, which I should have done. But just making the point, like, this is a division, like, is it a must inform or is it a should inform? I would lean towards should personally, like it's the right thing to do, but it may not always happen for various reasons. But again, that's my 2 cents, please.
Others? We had a long conversation about this one, a long conversation. Yes.
Well, I mean, if you just go back 2 bullets, is it 2 bullets? Well, Oh, no, that's okay. Board members who visit schools have no more authority than any other citizen. So I suppose I don't understand the point of, where's the volunteer one? I've already lost it. It's just long. That's the long one. Uh, I suppose yeah, it seems redundant to me because if I'm a board member visiting a school and I have no more authority than any other citizen, it seems absurd that I would even have to let you know because it's already been established that I don't have any more authority than any other citizen. Am I reading that incorrectly?
I think I'm curious, like what Linda and then staff would prefer, because I get what you're saying, Dr. Hazen, about ideally you would inform the superintendent. But it's also not always possible. And I think if we are on campus, whether we are just there in our parental capacity or volunteering, like we can't completely take our board hat off. So I could see a situation where it's helpful for us to be aware and even let Linda know, because things transpire while we're on campus and we all want to be on the same page and, have site personnel feel comfortable with when we're showing up and what's going on, and communicate about it. So I do see the value of it, not because we intend to do anything and act outside of our authority. I think it's because of the perception, like there's a school board member on campus and just kind of having that awareness. That said, I agree what you mean with what you said about it being redundant. But I think it's more pulling at something like our awareness versus just the rule.
I do have to say that if I show up as a visitor and I don't have my lanyard on and I don't have my badge on and I smile at the camera and my sticker prints out and I put the visitor sticker on, I'm officially a visitor. I'm not a board member at that point. I understand that I'm always a board member, but specifically, I have no more authority than any other citizen. I'm not there in a board member's capacity. And so I don't even think I've ever reached out to you. So I guess I'm off the board too, Elliot. You guys are in a bind. But I mean, if I'm in my kid's classroom, their teacher knows I'm coming because I've arranged it, and just like any other parent. I don't.
With us,
I'm forgetting where we landed on this, but I know we had a big conversation. I think really where it ended in the end is, I mean, I think we even talked about it, Laura, that you are volunteering all year long. I think, same thing with, Jennifer. I mean, you're in there, but you kind of have a regular schedule, and I knew about it ahead of time at the beginning of the year. And so it's kind of that expectation that, yeah, you're doing this, you've signed up for it as there's a need at the school sites. I think it's wonderful, right? That you get to wear, both of those hats. So I think what we ended up kind of agreeing to was it would really just be sort of more of an informal. It's not to the degree of you're not going to reach out every time, every day that you're doing it, but it's just a matter of, at the beginning of the year, knowing that, you'll be, doing this in a certain capacity, for the rest of the year, and you're working directly with the school site principal and the teacher, to get that set up. So I think that's where we ultimately ended up, agreeing, to it. For the reason that, yes, as a board member, you're always carrying, that weight, right? And everyone's going to perceive you as that way, even though you're there, you're there in a parent, capacity, just, I think, being cognizant, of it. So I think that was the reason we ended up keeping it. I think we adjusted it to a certain degree to make it a bit more flexible, but
and maybe some of it too, I don't know if I can't remember last year, but now we have a new principal at one of the schools. So if it's a preference of hers that she knows beforehand, or, if the teachers are more comfortable, I would say that that's probably the thing that's most important. As long as the teacher that's there, that inside the classroom is comfortable and the principal's comfortable.
I think that's a very good point, because having been in all of those roles, as a teacher, it's awkward. It's very awkward to have a board member come on your campus because you're torn. As a principal, it's way more awkward because depending on the superintendent, in some cases are very adamant of, if they're on your campus, you better call us. It makes a huge difference. I think in both of your cases where you have an agreement, you're going to volunteer in your kids' classes. And sometimes you may have a schedule, but sometimes you may not, you know, there may be spontaneous. And to your point, Elliot, too, where, oh, shoot, wife is supposed to do it, I filled in. That's not really what we're talking about. Like, because there are going to be exceptions. There absolutely are. But we're basically saying as a general rule, if you're talking about a teacher and you're talking about a principal, they're going to be way more comfortable because as a principal, I'm going to run and call the superintendent. Because the superintendent has typically is going to make a deal. If a board member comes on your campus, please let me know. So I'm going to do that whether you guys have asked for it or not. That's automatically going to happen. So I think
Does that happen in our district?
Not really, because none of you really visit the school size without, you know, going through the proper, you know, channels with it. So
Okay.
no, it has not happened,
Okay.
you know, since I've been here at all. No.
I do know of districts where there has been a parent that would go and might go to a teacher and be like, hey, let's talk about these issues and do these things. And like, yeah, start garnering. So I think and that's the way I try to read this as, frankly, and no offense to you, Trustee Shamas, but a new board member, not a returning, but like as a new board member, I would just read this and be afraid that I'd say, okay, that means if I'm going to fill in for my wife, I better text Dr. Adamson and, you know, because yeah.
That being said,
Yeah.
no joke, I'm volunteering tomorrow and Friday.
Every week.
Is that okay?
You have been notified.
See what?
I will wear a disguise to make everyone feel cool, but
That was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is why we're doing it. This is why we're doing it. So we have an understanding. We don't want this to be so rigid that there's not any flexibility. And because of who you are, it's probably a very rare experience, but this is for any and everybody. Whether you're a great board or a not so good board. And so to have that practice in place, it's important, but.
And when you take a look at this in the normal course, there might be refinements that you're going to see. Let's change it. When I read this, I saw it as not reflecting an individual visit. I called the teacher. I said, I'd like to just come by and visit your classroom tomorrow, as opposed to I'm going to be a regular volunteer in that classroom.
Yeah.
But as you see things, there may be things you want to change down the road. And I've made a couple notes for the parking lot of areas that you might want to revisit and refine a bit.
Well, I'll just say. Okay, where it says a board member whose child is attending a school district. Well, I think that it should say, because this happened to me, a board member's child instead of whose child, a board member's child is aware of his or her parents' role as a board member. Because I did have my youngest was in high school. The others were already out when I got on the board, but my youngest was in high school.
Good point.
And he was a little bit of a pistol with some teachers that he didn't care for. And at one point he got mad at a teacher and said, my mother's on the school board and she can have you fired. Yeah. Thank God I knew that teacher and she knew me and she didn't take him serious at all. But you know, it was hilarious now, but not then. So it's something that you might want to discuss when your kids get a little older. That you know, they might have some attention paid to them because other kids know their parents on the school board, or they have an idea of what that means, what kind of power they may or may not have. So, yeah.
The other thing is I look at it too. What if I'm a grandparent? Yeah. But no, it doesn't was my grandparent and I may have guardianship.
Yeah.
It might even just
Or
family member.
guardian or so I think that one we may want to look at again for sure.
Good parking lot.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Being a high caliber governance team. We don't need to read that. You guys know this. I do want to go to the norms though. If you may recall, there were at one point, how many norms were there? 20 something. So we basically reduced them to the top 10. When we talked about how oftentimes conditions, situations make a difference, these top 10 may fluctuate based on some things, but just take a look at those top 10. Tell us what you think.
And again, while you guys are reading for the past history here, we actually had post-it notes. I think Beth, you might have been here for some of those. But we were putting this, like, we each had 3 post-it notes we could put on the norms below. So in some way, I would almost recommend, I mean, the top 10 are important, but the ones below, you can see everything we were choosing from to choose, you know, to get to these 10. And so this is something I do like the idea of us doing at a later point. Again, not this meeting, but I don't know. I don't know if it's good or if it's just like, you know, burned in there.
Take it.
I remember which one we all voted for. There was like 1 or 2 we all voted for.
Questions, thoughts? Questions or thoughts?
Well, I remember you guys going through this and there was, you know, reasons that you were doing this. And so those reasons change as your board changes. And because some of this is very parental, you know, in a way that maybe isn't necessary. I don't know. Not all of it. Some of it's good, but it's quite a bit. It's kind of like a over dictatorial type of listing of behaviors, you know, that kind of tells you like, whoops, you know, this board was having some problems here and needed to spell out good behavior, you know. There's one behaviors though, and maybe it's somewhere in here later on, but we can get to some maybe parking lot. But one of the things I think tends to be missing is when you talk about coming to consensus, or how do you handle differences of opinions and trying to get some kind of a consensus vote. But it doesn't really tell you some methodology and how to do that. And I think that would be a good place in here. Maybe at a later time, we can think about it, about how you would want, you know, the board president to run it when there's obvious, you know, disagreements about before a vote's going to take, and see what you can do to get a consensus. Sometimes you can't, and that's okay, but you do what you can so that everyone feels they've been heard and respected. But just there's some details you might be able to write out in terms of a procedure to just make sure that consensus is targeted, or yeah.
I've seen that where how a board manages conflict. And this is how we manage conflict.
Yeah.
And so I think you're looking at something like that to say when there is disagreement and when you can't reach consensus and you've got to go to vote, you know, those are things that do happen as a part of the board.
I would love that.
Yeah, I like that.
I would love that for all of us to be on the same page about what our resources and supports are as board members. And how to communicate with one another when these things inevitably do come up, because they will.
Now let's say we have sorry.
Go ahead.
I wasn't sure. For item 4, solidarity. I mean, we don't have anything that speaks to that exactly, but that'd be a great spot for it to potentially go. And again, I would also agree with that coming in, you know, for these top 10 norms, per your point, also, that was well said, Beth. I mean, I think items 5 and 10 are also like, if we're doing 5, we're doing 10. And you know, so I do think 10 is one of those that I feel our board, trying to say how best to say it, but I don't think it's something we need reminders on. And it would be something to consider for our next top 10 norms. Or just cut to, oh,
I think number 8 served its purpose when it was put on there, and I don't necessarily know that that is something that we need to remind each other on this board. I don't get that sense. But if others think that it's important to be on there, I think that that's fine.
I would love for us to reevaluate the list, because the more I look at this, the more, like you said, this is clearly a group of people who were being very mindful of each other's actions, and there wasn't a strong like feeling of trust. This feels like a more collective group that is focused on governing and the kids and what our charge is collectively. And so I would like that to be reflected a bit more. So we can model that.
Okay, so we can revisit the norms in general. And maybe create another top 10 based upon what this board feels more comfortable with. That makes sense.
The norms always reflect the times.
Yep.
And times change.
Cool.
Yeah. I put in the parking lot that top 10 norm review would be something we would do in it.
Mhm. Taking a look at day-to-day. Number 1, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Box between 2, A through G.
Well, one hot word out there that's really has a probably a different definition to every one of us is the word micromanage. And yeah, I mean, okay, I agree, you don't micromanage, but what I consider micromanaging, Jen may say that's not micromanaging, that's doing my job. So, you know, there's that, you have to recognize that, you know, that micromanaging is kind of that word that gets thrown around without a clear understanding of what micromanaging is. So you could put up there, but I don't know that we're all going to understand what that means.
Thoughts, comments? Either that comment or other A through G, think we okay? Therefore,
I appreciate your comments, and I think where I'm at is it's just such a difference for us sitting in this room that a year makes. That we're having a conversation about whether or not micromanaging, like what that looks like to each one of us, and that it's okay that it's different.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you bringing that to light, and I'm just having a moment of reflection that we're here and we can have the conversation, and yeah, it's good.
And one thought on that, because this is where it gets difficult for the norms, is like how much, you know, like you say that there's kind of the cheat sheet and then the playbook, right? That actually spells everything out. And I was recently reminded on the How Not to Be a Terrible School Board Member book, and they have a great section, for example, on micromanaging. So I do wonder if that's the kind of thing. I think we did some of this last time, like to point at but you know, micromanaging as it's defined in this book, we could say, or something like that. So that we're not having to redefine it, but it's pretty clear there where that line is drawn, I feel.
And I think one more thing to consider too is that we each have our own relationship with the superintendent, and that's a give and take. So if we have something and it is going too far across the line, I want Linda to tell myself or feel comfortable telling any of us, hey, like, you know, you've gotten to staff territory, or in the kind and very respectful way that I know you would tell us. But I would want to be told like, hey, this feels like you're getting into micromanaging territory, or this isn't a line I'm not comfortable with you asking, you know, for us to do something about. So I think it's kind of like upon all of us, you know, to be able to say like, I'm comfortable when you tell me no, or when you tell me like, you're getting into parent land instead of wearing your school board hat or whatever it might be. Yeah.
So maybe one of our new norms could be that we're all okay with being told that we're in the wrong track.
Sure.
And to be clear, that's been part of our superintendent goals with Dr. Adamson as well. Is exactly that, is please do tell us no, and tell us that, even recognizing the difficult situation that puts her in, because you're as an employer telling your employee, you know, to correct us. But again, especially with this makeup of the board too, I think it highlights that and the importance of that moving forward.
And I think you brought up a very good point, Jennifer, and that being what a difference a year makes. And sometimes you put those things in based on those current circumstances, and you know, it may not be as needed. It is a cautionary place though. And I say that because a lot of it has to do, and Ellie, you mentioned that, and that being the superintendent telling one of you, back off. Basically, that's what I'm telling you, you're micromanaging me. And of course, she'll say it more articulately and kindly than that, but it is a interesting place to be in her shoes. But being able to at least have the conversation is important. Yeah, so I think it's the word we definitely can look at and look at some other resources.
Yeah, I think too that the word micromanage is reflective of a value. And it's the value that the person is really caring about. And they're using what's looking like micromanagement to get it heard or bring attention to it. So, you know, there's ways to address it without it feeling that the other person is wrong about something, you know, but getting to what is really causing that person to be upset or feel that they need to interject some way.
Well, and that is coming from somebody that has a big heart and is filled with caring. And there are people that are just wanting to control. And there's a difference there, you know, and micromanaging to somebody that is a control freak that just wants to be in charge is very different from somebody that cares and wants to sees something that needs help and wants to contribute. Do you know what I mean? And so that's a perfect example of like the vast difference of the definition of the word micromanage. You know, because somebody that is a controlling human being, it probably wouldn't even, I don't even know that it would occur to them that it's micromanaging. They probably just see a job that needs to get done and they want to do it themselves, you know? So, but I don't think that's anybody here.
No, I think that's true. What you're both saying, though, it looks different over time. Like what micromanagement might have felt like or looked like in a different version of the board and a different iteration of staff may totally feel like it's unnecessary now. And I can say just from my experience being clerk the first go round, there was a lot more responsibility put on us as the president and the clerk to kind of do some of the leadership duties in the district that I'm now learning aren't our roles as board members even. And so things that might have come off as micromanaging or appeared as micromanaging at the time, it was kind of like an absence of anyone leading us or telling us how to be managed. I mean, I don't want to be managed, but I think now that we're where we're at today, like if it comes to a point where we're concerned about each other's behavior, like you always say, I want us to be able to tell each other.
Yeah.
And I want us to be able to, for Linda to be able to say like, all right, Jen, one too many times, or whatever the circumstances are. And I hope that we're kind of creating that environment where we all feel comfortable doing that.
Agree. And
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, I don't know if it helps to all go around the table and look at Lynn, like you have 1,000%. There I go, 1,000%, but whatever. School law, it's 100%. I get reminded at home, there's no such thing as 1,000%. But you have my permission to ever tell me if I overstep or if I micromanage in any way. And so that's being recorded in a public forum. So please do. I mean, I'm accepting of it. And I think that and it's important. It's important. The feedback is important because there's no way to know if there's an overstep that's happening if it doesn't get addressed. Yep. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. In fairness, right? You're absolutely right, Nora. Yep. Agreed.
And I'll just put a second on that because is that it's not just to Linda, but to each other. Like if I've done something that, offends you or I mean, if I wore the wrong color socks, please don't call me about that or text me. But if it's something that honestly is, offended you or something that's, that you think I made a misstep, like that's to me the importance of the board is do reach out to me and let me know because I think that's important for us to all be on the same page. We're not the same page, but on the page of that's something we want or not, because that is something we had issues agreeing with as a previous board.
Remember the topic, high quality governance team. So how do we become, sustain, maintain being that along the way? And so I think taking a look at that word, I think it's great is for us to look at it and maybe come up with maybe even a different word, but also appreciate the idea of you guys giving Linda permission to say, hey, if we're overstepping, feel free to jump in and let us know. Okay, good.
I mean, I'm a new board member, but Dr. Adamson has yelled at me multiple times already. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. She just cursed me out. No. No, I appreciate honesty from Dr. Adamson and everyone else's.
So bad. Okay.
Yeah.
Louis, you want to move up H through T? I think this is going to be one of those areas where you want to look at it yourself. And we'll come back, and I'm looking at it just for the sense of time. And so I want to go through the main topics. Looking at ethics and integrity, keep going up.
And really, if you don't mind my interrupting, Eric, but I think all of these are ultimately, if we're going to do that follow-up activity with the top 10, this is where we're going to be selecting our top 10 from. So
Yeah.
And just to point out number 5, how the board communicates, a couple of you, really drew out, some of the importance of that. And there's some nice, sort of bullets, in that section in particular. So,
yes.
But again, I think we can cover all of that in that activity.
And even looking at 6, I think just listening to the conversation tonight, I feel like this is a board who's going to be supportive, respectful, and considerate of one another and understands what your roles are.
Can I say something? This time it's serious, or I mean, semi-serious. And it's kind of off topic, but we do not withhold or obstruct the flow of important information. That point and, general points about transparency, or maybe not obviously, I believe in that clearly, but also I think there's a time where public transparency can actually be a detriment to how you feel, like the Post-it notes for how the board took these. If you're publicly doing it, I worry about kind of just like seeing the physical representation of lots of Post-it notes there, and then I should put it there, or like that's where the group's leading it. It kind of the user interface of that decision making is a little persuasive in one way or another. So I think sometimes there, at least for an initial vote or something, I think there is a usefulness or utility to to taking a blind vote or something like that, and then talking about it. That's something completely different, but it's just stuck out while going over these.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a potential closed session type topic, and I don't know if that's something that's done in closed session where you would have a blind vote before a final vote, just to see where people stand. And then the last time I remember doing that was on a hiring committee, I think, right? Didn't we do that with?
Or I don't even mean a blind vote for something big, but sort of really just a post-it note thing in general. It's not a big hiring decision or something, but I just think it's important to be mindful of.
Right, influence and sway,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Like a blind vote for when we're selecting our norms.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're just kind of. So, yeah, so that way it's this sort of, we're picking them organically,
Right.
individually, and then coming together to say, like, this is what I found I think is most important for our board. And then we kind of come together, as opposed to it being like this sort of, no, everybody go up and make your mark.
So homework for next governance meeting
Like
would be
that.
for us to
That's great.
come with our top 10 from all of them.
Yeah.
And then we could start that way rather than doing it.
Yeah, and that was just the example that I thought of now, but yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Looking at board meetings. This was one we had spend a little time on.
Lewis, it's on page 8.
Just following on Mike's point for M, we want to make an exception for course of profane language when Linda's telling us what we've done wrong, right?
I second that.
Yes, yes.
Louis, we need like a bleep button.
The 2-second delay, yes.
Oh, boy.
Good. Let's go to our protocols next, please. You guys are okay with that? And Lou's gonna talk more about the Brown Act as we move forward. And so a lot of this will be covered either in scenarios or conversation with us along the way. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on agenda preparation and board meeting preparation. I do want to look at page 10 briefly, which one-on-one is 10 and 11, kind of splitting it. And again, Lou will talk more about that if necessary in the other aspect of things. I'm going to skip Lou and have them read the rest of it.
Yeah, that's good.
Visiting schools as a board member. I think we spent a little time on that one earlier. I would like to go to handling complaints, concerns or complaints from the public.
Can I ask a scenario question on these Rs? Sitting now that I have to sit in a different role than I did last time. Specifically if what we've talked about this before, but if there's a member of the public that asks a question, sometimes the board will say, we have that question as well. And I seem to remember that's not always the best practice that was recommended. And then the secondarily is if there is a question being asked that is actually a good question, like, or like, when on the agenda are you going to discuss this? Is that still the kind of thing that you still just don't respond? Like, sorry, it's a two-parter, but
Yeah.
listening to those R's.
Yeah, remember, you are there to conduct a public business, but it's not a town hall meeting. So, nor is it a press conference. So the public has a right to comment on each item on the agenda. And if people are inclined to ask questions out in the public, so they'll say, what about this? What about that? If it's a easy answered question that the staff, you refer it to staff. If it's more complex.
At a later time or immediately?
Yeah, that's a quite good question for staff. It's almost a judgment call on whether or not you're going to do that there and put somebody on the spot, or let me have the superintendent or administration get back to you on that. And you're not taking up valuable meeting time to get into a debate on whether or not something should or shouldn't happen in a certain way. Okay. But you want to keep your meetings focused on the business you're doing. You want to be respectful of the public that's addressing you. You want to listen to what their comments are. And at some point, if somebody goes on too long and it's too complex, say, you make some good points. Can you bring those issues up with contact the superintendent's office or the business office or the HR office to explore that further? I think they can answer your questions more appropriately. Let's go on to the next agenda item. Okay. It's a judgment call there. And one of the things we were going to talk about as well is like, what's the role of board president? Because you're the one whose shoulders it falls on to do that. Okay.
But I can nominate someone else, right? Like, that's kidding.
Yeah.
So is there anything wrong with just saying thank you for your comment? Because with some people that will come and ask, some people will come and make comment, and then on occasion will ask questions. And then some people will get up and they're heated and they're asking questions. And if you refer one person to somebody and not the next person, then there can be this feeling of, well, you didn't pay attention to me and all of this. So looking at it from, because we're in such a small community, a thank you for your comment. Or if it is super simple, to just look at somebody and say, we'll have someone follow up with you. Just blanket instead of calling out a staff member, because
that is the better policy.
I always did that.
Sort of a general.
Yes.
Thank you.
Because you will at some point be accused of playing favorites.
That's it.
If you answer this person's questions all the time, and then someone who has a heated question or someone you don't necessarily care for, they have an angle and you don't answer theirs in the same way. So I would typically say, thank you for your question. At best, I would say we'll have staff reach out to you and not put them on the spot, to your point. At that
And it
particular point.
yeah.
So that's what I've done. And I was fairly successful. Not everybody liked it because it's sometimes lose favorite term of no comment. Worst thing you can say in many cases, but the reality of it is that there are appropriate times, and I did exactly what you said. But
yeah,
I just kind of feel like it's a safer bet, and it's fair across the board.
I agree. I agree with you. I think the message that we respect and appreciate all feedback, and that we're going to treat feedback consistently, and that's how everyone can be received, is I want people to feel welcome regardless of their questions or their concerns or whether I personally agree with them. I think there should be space for that. So I think if we're consistent in our messaging about public comment, And that helps create an environment where people can share.
And that's part of why I brought it up, is that's what I want feedback from everyone in the room here on. And I agree with that completely, is I like the idea of just saying, thank you for your comment.
Mhm.
And I can even think about making a comment at the onset before, if there's a questions asked or comments raised, I'll direct them before even, yeah.
And if staff is following up with somebody, depending on what the question is and who the person is and how, heated the topic is, I kind of wonder what the follow through would be, where if staff follows up and then there's another question, and then staff follows up and then there's another question, and then staff follows up and then there's another question, and sort of where does it end? So is it a follow up one time to that specific question, or does it continue? And maybe that's not my business, but I just wonder how exhausting it can become if it's an open-ended sort of back and forth email situation.
I think it depends on the situation. But typically, yeah, when we have followed up in the past, I mean, we try to cover, everything in one conversation. If it feels like it's more than that, sometimes just a meeting or a phone conversation, is easier. I think we just gauge it, according to, and I will say, I don't think there's been a situation that I can think of, in the last year where we followed up with something and it's sort of, gone on forever. But I think typically it's appreciated, number one, the follow-up, whomever, is asking. And the second part of that is the follow-up questions that come after one answer is received, tend to be better, addressed in a phone conversation.
Okay.
What we found, yeah.
I think I'm just sort of anticipating the upcoming year, because there's a lot changing right now, and there's going to probably be a little bit of upheaval and emotion coming out. So I just sort of wondered what it was more of a general wondering than anything, but okay.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, I mean, typically this is specific to questions that come out. I mean, we're not going to follow up if someone's just, going in and they're making a statement, right? That they're wanting, maybe, a listening ear, right? It would be a specific question, would be the only time I think we would then say, in response to those questions, a member of staff will follow up, to that.
I would love to, I would honestly not even like to put staff on the spot that they have to. I mean, I like the idea. Thank you for your comment. And
I mean,
I will try to.
It's like how many, if it's like a number question, but if it's like, what do you plan to do on blah, 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 it's sort of like, thank you for your comment. We've heard your comment. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I even worry a little bit of
right now.
The thing I worry about is even if it's sorry, and we're getting a little more weedy here, so if it needs to be parking lot, but even if it's a question that would just number question, like you can get those people that will ask lots and lots of number questions, and it comes down as, is it so, might be one of those that is just a trust issue and maybe feedback where, I can try to give a look and, without saying it verbally, just to make clear that we're on the same page, that there's a need for that follow-up, or I don't know, no, that's getting around the transparency. But I just worry that even if it is a question that we could have staff follow up with.
I don't want it to be exhausting.
Exactly, right? Oh,
Everyone's doing, there's a lot on everyone's plate. So
exactly. So I would love to put that more in your hands, Superintendent Adamson, to make the decision whether it needs to be followed up than the boards. And that's fair.
I was just processing. You could have an absolute rule that you don't take questions. The board doesn't take questions. It's not a press conference. You refer to everything to the superintendent. So if you have a question, please contact the superintendent tomorrow morning, or follow up with the superintendent after the meeting sometime, and she'll make sure that your questions get answered. And you might refer it to somebody else who's expert in that particular area, but you are not taking questions to either staff or the board at them. You certainly could do that. There are the easy questions like, I forgot what night is parent open house. Okay. Well, I don't understand that budget item, and I don't know why you're spending $3 million on that item. Why are you okay? Why are you doing that? And you're going to approve the budget, and I want to know now as a citizen why you're spending that kind of money. It's my taxpayer money, and you're voting on the budget. Tomorrow, the superintendent gives me an answer, but I have no idea what you're voting on. I mean, there is that kind of situation that can come up and create some tension. If it's tense, if things aren't going well at the meeting, you can always take a break. Okay. And deflect it and let staff go talk to that person. Okay.
Right, to get that question.
So we're gonna take a 5-minute recess, just to refresh, get some water or whatever. And then staff can go say, let me explain something to you, and that can take place there, rather than putting the board members on the spot of answering some complex questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would even, I mean, I, again, put this out there, but I like the idea even of, rather than responding to the question at the time, having a board member write it down if it is something that's important, and a board member could bring it up later. If it is a valid question, like if there really is a question, you know, because I think we've had the habit as a board of instead saying, yes, I also have that question. Can you please answer it? I'm wondering if it's better to parking lot it till the board discusses it.
I think it's not probably a good practice
Okay.
to say, I also had that question, because
No,
you
right.
have your own questions, and you can ask whatever questions you want of staff. Make sure you're satisfied with the things you're voting on, you're comfortable with, okay? That's your job, and your positions. So I would say, well, let the public comment end. And then whatever questions you may have, they may be some of the same, they may be different. Then you can ask staff for clarity on your questions.
Thoughts, comments?
That's exactly where I was going.
Well, I think there's two different kinds of public upsetness. One, when you already know this topic that we have on the agenda is going to get a lot of hot-blooded people here. And so when you know that, then you can decide ahead of time, how do you want to handle that? Do you want to maybe say we're going to have a short question answer session where you get to write out a question and hand it in, or whatever you want to do? But I mean, so that's something you can plan for, because a lot of times you do know a certain subject is going to come up, and you maybe you even heard the rumors, like, you know, we know Planned Parenthood opposition is coming. Okay, so how are we going to handle it? But the other one that I've experienced, and I'm really would like to see us be responding to, is when you get a parent who is upset about something that happened to their kid in school, and they come up to the podium and they're very upset, and they're trying to explain to you how bad this was or how wrong this was, then just to say thank you for your comment is not going to be good. Okay, so I would like us to be able to say, we as a board are understanding these emotions, and we take it serious. And, you know, and then, as you know, you can't say much more.
Thank you for your comment with context, basically.
Yeah, that it's important, because I've seen parents walk away feeling like, wow, nobody heard me, you know, and you know, it's that's just something for the board president to keep in mind, that there are going to be times when it's important to be human and say, you know, we are taking this so seriously.
You can, you can sometimes do something to the effect of, we hear you. And that's where the president and Linda can look at each other and say, and we'll have staff follow up with you. Simple as that. And letting it go. But it's basically exactly what Laura was saying earlier, is that we hear you. And we'll have staff follow up with you on that aspect, because you're right, they are different.
Yeah, and the how it's conveyed to them,
Yeah.
that
Right.
we're saying, thank you for your comment, moving right along.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't demonstrate that I was listening and that it was important. So being able to really just like take a moment, take it in, not react quickly and then connect with the person before we move on, even if there isn't anything else that we can do in that moment, in which there probably isn't, other than listen. Yeah, and I like the piece about kind of meeting the emotion of the moment, not in a way where we're reactive, but just in a way that we're aware and mindful of the importance and seriousness for this person who is brave enough to bring their concerns and sit on a hot mic for 3 minutes and share something that's probably been really difficult, right? Yeah, so how we do that and just being able to say a sentence or two or three, that's the,
Yeah, yeah, just
Yeah.
something conveys
Yeah.
empathy for
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
I had printed up your bylaws on the role of the board president, and I thought I'd just hand that out. There's reference to it in the handbook on page 11. Louis, could you put that section up on page 11? The role of the president of the board. Okay, so it's just a brief statement in your handbook, but it refers to this particular bylaw of what the president's role is, and I think it's a pretty good summary of what the expectations are. It's basically, while the president doesn't have any more power than any other board member, the president is sort of the parliamentarian that runs the meeting, calls the meeting, makes sure the meeting agendas are put together in advance, presides over it, calls the agenda items, calls on people to speak, make sure that every board member, and I think I've watched your board meetings, I've been at your board. I think you did a really good job of giving every board member an opportunity to express their views on things, and that before you move on to a vote. So that's one of the things that you do. And you also call for the vote. You make the motion. Okay.
So just a question, I got louder real quick. The question on that, like, is it always on the president to make the motion? Because that's one thing we haven't always done. Because I just see that as number 9 there.
President has the authority to make motions just as every other board member does.
Right.
And then once the motion is made, to call for the vote on the motion.
But you wouldn't recommend that the president be the primary because I could see a situation, I mean, I could help zip through things if I agree with something, just every time make that motion and go, but I don't think that's the right.
You don't want to
tone.
dominate the meeting because you don't want to lessen any other board member's presence or authority. Okay. And most of the time, the board president will sit back and wait for somebody to make a motion rather than make the motion. If it's not going anywhere and you do control the agenda, you aren't going to all sit there and stare at each other. But so if sometimes motions are that are going to fail or put out there just to see what the vote is. Okay, and it fails. So then you move on. But I see most presidents being deferential to their colleagues on the board and see if somebody wants to make a motion on something. And then I see if there's no motion, well, I'll move so-and-so and see what the vote happens. Okay. But it's basically the orderly conduct of the meeting. And when those tensions arise over those controversial issues that will come up, we're not at the end of that. I can guarantee you they will come up. You listen empathetically to people. If it starts to get out of hand, you just call for a brief recess. Take a 10-minute recess and then let staff go and deal with the upset person and see if they can calm them down. Yeah. And then reconvene.
Sorry, one more quick question. Is the recess the first recourse of action, or is it okay for the board president to try first? Or is really, would you recommend recess should be? I mean, it depends on degree, right? Like we were talking about.
Yeah, let's say somebody, it doesn't happen very often, but I've seen it where somebody goes over their 3 minutes and they just keep talking. Okay. You're supposed to manage that. If you're going to extend that 3 minutes, it probably should be, you're over your 3 minutes. Does the board want to extend the time or not? Rather than just putting or if you don't want to do that, you simply could say, you're at the end of your 3 minutes. Thank you very much for your comments. I think we all heard what you had to say. I'm ready for our next speaker. Okay, and our next, do you do the cards? I've forgotten. You don't do cards. Okay. Okay. People just come up and speak on items. Okay.
Should you? Should you do cards?
No. That's my personal opinion. You don't have to state your name or give any identifying information for public comment. So requiring that, I don't think that comports with the law.
I have a question about, and we've seen this here, where somebody wants to give their 3 minutes
No.
to the person that just didn't get the rest of it, has been speaking for over 3 minutes, and then somebody comes up and says, I'd like to give my 3 minutes to Bob Smith, who couldn't get out all of his thoughts in 3 minutes. So that, we've seen it, and it
Mhm. Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
happen, but
I don't think the 3 minutes are a commodity to be traded.
yeah, but it's interesting the way that it happens because,
Oh, yeah.
it gets leveraged and all that. So
Uh,
I don't know if that is something that we
Yeah.
discuss up front, like everybody, each individual gets 3 minutes. 3 minutes will not be whatever,
Right.
however we have to say it, but it might be worth saying in the beginning.
Don't feel like it is.
I thought that was already in the past board protocols
I
because.
think we updated that last time for
Are
that
we
exact
reading it
reason.
before every?
I don't read everything, so I try to do the
Maybe it
quick
depends on the
highlights.
top, how many
Correct.
people are in the room.
I try a
There's a
lot,
lot of people in the room, we might want to read it.
right? But that's a good reminder. And if it comes up, I have no problem also just jumping in and be like, yes, thank you for that kind suggestion, but we do not pass along minutes. Everybody has their own story. Yeah, but we have seen that for sure.
Good conversation, guys. Thanks so much. We're going to drop down to page 15, which is the compact itself. Take a few minutes to read it. Because in the end, this is where we want to be, where you all sign off on it down the road. Yeah. Kind of glad.
How non-committal.
We have read every single word and phrase.
Maybe it's too.
We get in the September, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Compact is this. I have.
No, I don't think so. I think that was there. Yeah. I think that was there. Yeah. Yeah.
And we will be targeting a similar date, September, to resign, or is that something we would do as early than that?
Yeah, you can, I think that you could either commit to it now and say subject to change. Or you can, it's really, the three of you have already committed to it. So it's really a question of whether the two new board members are comfortable with this document now and can commit to it, or want to go through the review and revise process before they commit to it.
Right, and the committing does not stop the revising.
No,
Right, it's just.
absolutely not. It's
Oh,
a-
really?
At no
We're on
point,
it today.
at no point.
It's a living
It can
document.
always be revised. Mhm. They literally have. What's the board's wish moving forward?
We look at you, trustee Wax and trustee Shabazz. No pressure.
Just the technicality, the three of you are in the majority, so No.
This requires every single one of us. So if you say no, as a board, we say no. It's not a vote.
Mhm.
That's right. It's a commitment each of you make to each other.
It's unanimity of
And if
this.
it's
From the
commitment-
perusal, yeah, I mean,
Generally speaking.
but it. I can sign off of, I will add my name to it, but it does seem like there are a few matters up for review and editing.
Yeah, on this page 16, I had a bunch of little notes. I mean, 15, page 15.
I was on six, there is no 16, so I was worried.
I don't have my glasses.
I think
on.
it's the
Page
14,
50.
it must be 14 on there, because that's before the,
Well, that, there,
yeah, it's the before the compact.
yeah.
It's before the compact, so it's.
Welcoming new members to the board and then avoiding improprieties and appearances thereof. I don't know, there's just so much extra wordage in here that I am like blown away by redundancy.
Yes.
But in light of that, just there were some things that I wanted to put new in here. And that was, we didn't talk about welcoming new board members to the board, right?
No.
Okay, but that's in here.
Yeah.
So I don't think I really want to sign it until, I mean, we haven't perused it.
Right.
I mean, really.
Much like micromanage, peruse for one is different for each person. Look how easily swayed I am. I'm also,
I mean, I don't, yeah,
I'm not sure how much, what does it change? I mean, what effect? Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna review, if we approve and may make changes, how is that different than not approving it and making changes?
I'll just, in interest of moving us along, what I'm hearing is the two new board members are not totally comfortable with it. I suggest that you go back and go through the process again with everybody and have a document that everybody is committed to. I have clients who don't have a handbook. It is not the end of the world. Okay, you will function, but I think everybody does. So if you have one, everybody's got to buy into it and feel comfortable with it. And so until they do, I think you need to work with your colleagues, coming up with something that everybody says, yes, I'm behind this.
In the interest of limited time for all of us in our lives, I'd like to not draw up the process for like a whole 4 hours or something. I think maybe if I personally had the chance to actually read it word for word, I know I have had the chance, but to read it with this in mind, and then maybe have a shortened session. I mean, I don't want it to stop us from doing business or that, but I just would also like to be more learned in what the document says.
I'd like to just propose then possibly, we've talked about bringing this at, an upcoming governance session. So what, and Beth, even you saying there are things you want to add. I mean, I think there's place for that to, bring prior to that next meeting. If you, sort of have a list of the things that you want to do, same thing for you, Mike. And then that could even be shared with the, board ahead of time. And then that's something we could spend maybe 45 minutes at upcoming session, to just kind of go through the additions that are being proposed to add. And then, we can just agree to it at that point, right?
In terms of how it would work, would it be all right to kind of send questions or proposed edits to you and kind of make a document like we do for every meeting
Mm,
and just
sure.
kind of have answers and, you know, like
Sure.
highlight what a particular person would like to change or
Sure.
modify.
Yeah, we could do it as like a shared document that we do for our board agenda. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Can I ask a quick question? As far as my time on the board, we've kind of done, and I'm appreciative that we're having governance trainings. I'll say that first and foremost. It's very appreciative. We've kind of done this retooling of the handbook, and I think each time we've looked at it, we've all kind of left with the impression like this needs an overhaul. How do we get there? And I know that's not tonight's task, but like, what are the steps, or do we create a committee, or, I mean, what is that endeavor like? Like making the handbook more digestible and understandable and succinct, that type of.
Can I just throw an idea out? Is maybe we all walk away with a handbook, we take it home and we mark it up in whatever way we feel works for us, and then we bring it back. And then we can each just sort of say, this is what I was thinking for section 1. I was looking at the new trustee, whatever it said. Well, yeah, there's some stuff in there that could just get totally wiped out. I mean, personally, I think this just seems. But anyway, so maybe we each bring our changes or our additions, and then we go over it, and we all just sort of. So we could take a vote on it, or we could just sort of we're either in agreement or we're not in agreement, and majority rules, and then we just move forward. Maybe that's how the overhaul happens. I don't know. The thought.
I love that idea. I do like the idea if we wanted to we could either send them with questions or thoughts. So because there might be some nice situations where we all have the exact same 5 edits magically. So those could be kind of cleared off and be like, rather than having to vote on that. But if we could either bring them to a meeting or send them to Lynn in advance. I think either approach works for me. I like that idea.
I think if you send them to Linda in advance, it'll make your meeting more efficient to go through. And you can note, Laura thinks that this section should be modified. Beth thought that this sentence should be so you can attribute so that you can have a discussion and Laura can give her reasons why she thinks what areas should be changed. And I don't see you spending 4 hours doing that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the body itself is fine. What I don't want us to do is do too much wordsmithing where it becomes a document where you've got 5 different perspectives of something, and then you will be back to spending 4 hours on it from that perspective. But if there are things that really resonate with you and think, do we really need this entire thing? To your point, this section or this word, or looking at the word peruse and thinking, and well, we all kind of know that needs to go. But the more we can keep it basically intact, and then with our ideas of, well, maybe someone can tell me the story behind this because I'm not quite understanding, that we can shorten the process. Because what I have also seen is just the opposite, where you wordsmith this thing to death and it never gets completed because it continues to get revised and you have the same conversations. Okay, good. Thank you.
Do you all need a comfort break, or should we just keep? Yeah. Okay. How about we take a 10-minute? 5 minutes.
5
minutes.
5.
That's what we're doing.
Okay, thank you guys. Sorry for laying down the order, but please continue, Lou and Eric. Yeah.
Okay, Louis, if you can go to like slide 5 in the overall presentation, that would be good. We're going to talk about the Brown Act and do a very quick review. And then we're going to do some exercises or some hypotheticals on the Brown Act. And all right here. Thank you, Louis. So the Brown Act covers all local governmental agencies. And it basically says that all of the public's business has to be conducted in public unless there's a specific exemption to have closed session discussion on it. So it's going to be very specific. If it's not in the closed session authorizations in the Brown Act, it has to be done in open session. Okay. Well, votes in open session have to be publicly stated. There's no secret voting ballot in open session, okay? The public has a right to comment on every item on the agenda at a regular board meeting. The public has a right to comment on anything that is within the jurisdiction of the board, as well as the agenda. So it may not be on the agenda, but if it's within your jurisdiction, the public has a right to comment. At a special board meeting, the public right is only to comment on things on the agenda. They don't have a right to comment on things that are not on the agenda, okay? The agenda has to be posted 72 hours in advance of regular meetings, 24 hours in advance of special meetings. You can only talk about those things that are on that agenda. It also has to be posted on your website.
Can I ask a question about that for the agendas in particular? And again, this is weedy, but if there's a typo in the 72-hour period, so let's say we notice a typo 48 hours before a regular meeting, and my thought is if the typo is substantive enough that a public member would not be able to understand, is it necessary to pull that item, or are there ways to address that?
Yeah, the question is the wording sufficient to tell the public what you're going to be talking about? There's no, it doesn't have to be more than 20 words. It can be very brief. But the question is, would a reasonable member of the public know that you're going to be talking about that topic? So it depends on what the typo is, and how substantive it is, and does it affect knowledge, and would the ordinary person have sufficient knowledge to say, yeah, I knew that. Okay. Second part, what's a meeting? A meeting is any congregation of a majority of the board at any place. So anytime there's 3 of you, since you have 5 on the board, you've got a quorum, you've got a meeting. Okay. The meetings require notice, the meetings require an agenda, and the meetings require no action to be taken on anything that is not on that agenda. Okay. Lewis, why don't you go to the next slide? Okay. One more. There are different kinds of meetings. One more slide. There are, the obvious is when 3 of you are in the same place at the same time. The not so obvious is 3 of you are communicating about the same subject. It may not be at the same time. It may not be in the same place. So that's the chain. Elliot sends an email to Jen. Jen responds to Elliot. Jen forwards that to Beth, just so she's aware. You just got a meeting, okay? It's any communication becomes a meeting. It can be a spokes and chain. It could be you communicate to the superintendent, and the superintendent then says, well, I heard from 3 board members that their view on this subject is XYZ. That's the spoken hub. You still have a meeting.
To be clear there, the hub does not have to be a board member.
The hub does not have to be a board
Like,
member.
Past board member, anybody.
It is anybody who is alive and can speak or
Great question, Elliot.
or
That's a
can
great
communicate in any way. Okay. It could be a carrier pigeon. Okay. If the communication is going to a majority of the board, you are having a board meeting. Okay. One more slide, Lewis, and then we're going to do some fun hypotheticals just to test. So it could be phones, it can be by email, it can be on text message, it can be in chat rooms, it can be on social media. So let's say I'm a board member and I have a social media page. And I put all my thoughts on about what's coming up on my social media page. And Mike reads it. And Mike makes some comments on my social media page. Not a board meeting yet. but then Laura reads it and she puts her comments down. I've got a meeting. Okay. So you can see any time there's communications on the same topic between board members, under the Brown Act, it's going to be a meeting.
In that instance you just described, what about the time frame? Does that matter at all? Or, I mean,
No.
okay, so Elliot posts something on his page and Laura comments on it. And a week later, Mike comments on it. It's still a meeting.
Yes.
So the time doesn't have a.
No. Because you can have it instantaneously
Mhm.
with the calls,
Right.
or you can have it delayed 10 minutes, 1 day, 1 week. If that communication is taking place on a subject matter that's within the board's jurisdiction, it's communications among a majority of the board. And that's what's prohibited by the Brown Act.
So Elliot, stop posting, frankly.
I apologize.
So Elliot posts and I read it and I comment, and then Beth reads it. Even if she doesn't comment, is that still a Brown Act violation? Because she now has information from 2 board members. And she
Yeah.
can, you can sway your vote or whatever.
Yeah,
So technically, she wouldn't
Technically,
even have to.
it's not
comment?
Brown Act violation.
Okay.
Technically,
no.
it's not a Brown. But I remember in this district, probably the time that Beth recalled the big commotion. What happened was one board member commented to another board member about a colleague on the board. I don't know how it happened, but that colleague found out about it. And I don't know how he found out about it. Okay, this is the controversy that was right before you got on the board. Okay. And that board member, this is this district, went to the DA's office and said, look at these communications. Now, in my opinion, that was not a Brown Act violation because there was no 3-way communication. The DA was out of town at a conference. One of his deputies looked at it, wrote a letter to the board members saying you violated the Brown Act. That's what gave rise to that recall movement, that whole recall thing. I was here then when all that, and it was tumultuous. It was a terrible time in this district. Yeah, and it wasn't a Brown Act violation. No one has gone to jail in California for violating the Brown Act. The DA actually prosecuted the City Council of Seaside a number of years ago for a Brown Act violation, which probably was a Brown Act violation. Took them to trial and couldn't get a conviction. You won't go to jail, but it's the accusation of a Brown Act violation that does the damage, the real damage. And it's the damage of shaking public confidence in you and your board and this board. And that's something you just don't want to do at all. Okay. Because you need the public support to do your work. And the more angry members of the public are, the harder it is for you to do your work and to do the good work. Okay. So don't even tiptoe to the edge. That's why I caution. If 2 board members are talking, it's not a Brown Act violation. But how does it make everybody else feel? Is there collusion going on? Why are you talking to that board member and not another board member? It's not a good way to do business for a public agency. So while it may be legal, I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's the right approach that's going to get you where you want to be, and you'll get a diversion. So having laid that out, let's take a look at some.
Can I ask, sorry,
Yeah, absolutely.
while you're passing out a very detailed legal question that's to make you excited,
Yeah.
I think. For AB 992 that was passed in 21, it says board council members are prohibited from responding directly to any post or comment that is made by another board member. So that suggests a 1v1 is
Well, I don't know what you're reading.
It's from the AALRR, so different, yeah.
I
Law.
don't, I would disagree that that's
Okay.
not a Brown Act violation. But it's not a good idea.
Right, okay. I was just curious, because that makes
Yeah.
it sound, because this was the update based on social media, so I wasn't sure if the social media update.
I don't agree that I would not call that a Brown Act violation, but I would.
It's right, definitely not a good idea.
Not a
Okay,
good
to know.
idea.
And
Not a-
as you know, as elected officials, the court of public opinion is critical for you guys. And so that's why you really want to stay away with it, even if it's not a violation, just the appearance of one. It's not a good optic.
All right, let's take a look and work through some of these hypothetical scenarios. Board member A, families having dinner at a restaurant, and board member B approaches at a local restaurant, and they share a table together. Do we have a Brown Act violation? No. Okay. It doesn't look good, but it's not a Brown Act violation, and there's nothing that says you can't be friends and you can't have each other over for dinner and talk about who's going to play in the Super Bowl or anything else you want to, or, yeah, you can do that, but think about the appearance. So what if board member C shows up? Can she join the party?
If it's social, yes, but if it's an issue, then no.
But when we're talking about the optics and
Right.
the appearance, that does put three of us together
Agreed.
in a room at a table.
Optics, I agree,
So two
but
of us is like the start, and then three of us, now they could be making a plan to make decisions. And let's say someone in the community walks in and,
agree on optics, but just speaking of the letter.
for the letter of the
not,
law,
yeah.
for sure. I think the optics are what I worry about the most, because that's where the stories start and that's where the rumors start, and that's where we lose, like Lou said, the confidence from
Look,
people who are starting to, have questions.
what's it look like? So what if board member, so we don't have, I think we can all agree that social conversation is not a Brown Act violation, but that's an optic issue, and whether or not you want to create a problem with the optics that are occurring. But if the board member C says, I'm so glad to run into you guys tonight because there's an issue at the middle school I want to discuss, and they proceed to have a discussion, we got a Brown Act violation, okay? Because we're talking about something within the jurisdiction of the board. So clearly that's a last scenario is a violation of the Brown Act. All right. Hypothetical 2, board member B reads an interesting article on high school graduation standards throughout the United States. Board member A sends a copy of the article by mail to the other 4 board members. Brown Act violation?
I vote no, not by the letter of the law.
Yep.
Oh, I missed that. Then yes, that is, sorry.
Well,
I read it the other way around.
this is just, okay, here's some information about high school graduation requirements.
Right.
This is what one school district's doing.
It's
We're
not
discussing
discussing
it.
it, right? It's just showing.
I'm just sharing information with you about what I read. Not a Brown Act violation.
But it opens that door, yeah, exactly.
It potentially. opens
Yeah.
the
All it takes is one response,
Way,
yeah.
right. That's the key. Like if I send that to Laura and Laura texts me like, great article, let's chat.
door.
Then we start,
Let's do that here.
yeah, right, even further. Oof.
Yeah. If you see interesting articles that you think are helpful, send it to the superintendent and say, I just read this and I wanted to share it with you and see what you think. And if she wants to share it with, she can go out and send, you're not commenting back. You're certainly not commenting to each other, but that's just information sharing. Okay. But again, for optics purposes, it's better to send it to the superintendent than to send it to each other. Okay. Because what we haven't talked about, and I don't want to get deeply into it, is under the Public Records Act every email you send to anybody in the world about school business is a public record regardless of where you send it from. Your district email or your personal email, if it's about school business, it's discoverable, okay? All right, so what if board member A emails the article to the other 4 board members? Well, not a Brown Act violation, but probably not a good idea because of the optics. What if board member A hands the article to the superintendent, she placed it on the Friday letter to the board? Perfectly okay. It's not a Brown Act violation. Superintendent can share information about the school district with all the board members. Does it make a difference if the board will consider the adoption of a resolution to modify the high school graduation standards? No, because you get information from the superintendent in advance of board meeting, so you can make informed decisions at your board meetings, okay? So it's not, you're just not going to be discussing it among yourselves, okay? So board member C, our third hypothetical, calls board member D to ask for board members D opinion on whether or not the board should consider changing an attendance boundary. Board member C and D discuss the issue, and then board member D calls board member E and discusses the issue. Brown Act violation? Yeah, probably.
Yes.
Probably. If board member D never shares what board member C said, it is technically it's not a Brown Act violation. Boy, but the optics, not good. Not good. You're putting your toe very close to the line and you want to be far away from it. What if board member C instead asks the superintendent to call board members D and E and get their opinions? Brown Act violation? Hub and spoke.
Mhm.
Okay.
If the superintendent doesn't spoke that back out, like if she just collects it and doesn't actually release it, in theory, that would be okay, right?
Potentially, yeah. I think you've got an optics issue, but you may not have a technical Brown Act. Again, but we don't want to end up where we were in the bad old days. Okay, yeah.
This is also off topic, but is this a good law? Just like in terms of how many, like potentially it's a Brown Act violation, like shouldn't it be more like clear cut about a situation? Like this is a California law. Do publics operate in other states like just
Willy-nilly.
with, yeah, with, you know,
I'd say every state has some version of the Brown Act.
mhm.
Okay. Whether it has been interpreted to the extent of technicalities of California is another degree question.
But you said no one was prosecuted, so it's like
California.
it's like a specter.
Well, they've been prosecuted, haven't been convicted.
Uh,
Yeah, Seaside City Council was prosecuted, but the jury didn't convict.
uh-huh.
I mean, it's a really interesting prudence question, because in some ways, the worst written laws are the most fun for legal analysts to dig into.
And if you have a Brown Act violation, the public has a right to make a demand to cure and correct. And if you don't cure and correct within 60 days, they can bring a lawsuit against you and recover attorney's fees.
What does cure and correct mean?
That means within 60 days, you go back. Let's say there was an action taken in closed session that should have been an open session.
Mhm.
Okay. And they say, we demand that you cure and correct this. You could re-agendize it for open session and then have the same discussion, have the same motion, and take the action over again.
In fact, and that basically corrective action, and that happens probably more than you think. That's typically what happens when somebody accuses a board of a Brown Act violation. Sometimes the board will say, you know what? We'll just re-agendize it and go through it and do it again.
It's a lot less expensive than going through a lawsuit
Mhm.
and risking attorney's fees.
Mhm.
But the real damage is the loss of public confidence and the accusation. And where I see districts that are struggling with this, it's usually it's not a Brown Act violation, but the public is up in arms over some controversial subject. And this is a way of attacking you for a technical violation rather than the substantive issue that they may be unhappy with.
But again, I'm so sorry, this is off.
No,
topic,
no,
but-
no.
But this is why my question about whether it's a good law, because if it is a controversial issue, then the threat of the Brown Act seems to be used as a cudgel or like a threat, you know, as opposed to it actually being a substantive claim. So like,
You are correct.
I don't know. It seems sort of achieving its goals, maybe, but
I think most public agencies are now very sensitive to allegations of Brown Act violation
sure.
and make every attempt not to. There are a
Oh,
few
yeah.
that are a bit cavalier, but that they're very few and very far between because the risks are so high.
Yeah.
Yeah. And whether or not it's a good law, I leave to,
It's the law.
Yeah.
it's the law. I don't make those decisions, but. Okay, we're now entering the blogosphere, parent group in the district. Parent group operates a blog about the district. All 7 board members regularly read what is on the blog. Is that a Brown Act violation? No, that would not be. What if at least 4 of the board members post comments or responses on the blog?
Yes.
We're getting there. Yeah, yeah. What if only 1 board member posts a comment or response on the blog? Not a Brown Act violation. Okay. What if it's a board member's Facebook page with their comments about school matters and other board members rarely visit that page to see what the board member is saying? No. That's not a Brown Act violation.
Going one way.
It's one-way communication. It's not two-way communication. Okay. But if you start posting your comments and you have a majority of the board posting their comments on that 1 board member's Facebook, you got a Brown Act violation.
And Lou, would that be the case of any response by 3 or more, liking the comment, loving the comment, thumbs up to the comment, and
Thumbs
so on? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Any indication of preference is going to be a Brown Act violation. Okay. Our penultimate hypothetical. Board member D sends an email to the other board members sharing his opinion on the school attendance boundary question. Brown Act violation? One-way communication, 1 board member to the other. Not a good idea, but not a Brown Act violation. Okay. That opinion should be expressed at the board meeting, but it's still not a Brown Act violation because it's 1 board member saying this is what I think. What if the other board member never responds? Still not a Brown Act violation.
Right.
That's-
Sorry, to go back to Beth's point, it's always kind of in that purgatory because they could respond a year later.
Yeah. Or a month later or a week later, they could respond. But if they never respond, it's not a Brown Act violation. Do you have a perception issue? Possibly. Possibly.
Question on the, like the Facebook question or page where more than 1 board member is responding, even with on the Facebook page example,
Yeah.
if more than 1 board member is responding, and it would seem to be a Brown Act violation, does that mean that those board members have to be identified? What if it's an anonymous comment?
Well,
What
it's
if-
sort of like,
What if
what
I'm,
if I
what if
shoplift and
I'm,
never get caught?
I'm commenting on, we'll use Elliot again. Elliot's post and, I don't identify myself as the person who's commenting, and then Laura comments but she doesn't know that I commented.
Yeah. Then it's a matter of getting caught.
Uh-huh.
It's a Brown Act violation because you're a board member and you're simply masking that. Okay, so you've done it, but you haven't disclosed that who you are. You've still done it. Okay. It's sort of like wearing the mask
Uh-huh.
when you rob the bank, you're still robbing the bank. Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't me.
Okay. Five is, board member D sends an email to the other board member showing his opinion on school attendance boundaries, Brown Act violation. No, one-way communication. If the other board members never respond, not a Brown Act violation. If D asks the superintendent to send the email, Brown Act violation, potentially. It makes an issue if it's on it doesn't make an issue whether or not it's on a future agenda. That's irrelevant. Okay. Now, it could be cured if somebody then claims you had a Brown Act violation. You could then put it on a future agenda and have that discussion, and that's your cure and correct. Okay. And then I'm gonna go to the last one on the last page.
Can I ask a quick question
Yeah.
about cure and correct? Is the cure and correct discussing the Brown Act violation in a public setting? Is that what that is? Or is it discussing that
Thank you, Laura. That's an excellent question. Yeah, it's a
it's
great
basically
question.
like a public?
If you get a demand, an accusation of Brown Act and a demand to cure and correct, in order to cure and correct, you are supposed to say, we have an allegation of a Brown Act violation. We are putting this item on the agenda. We're going to be discussing it publicly, and we will never do that again. Okay.
And do you name names at that point to say like,
No, you wouldn't say, well, Elliot violated the Brown Act and he put me in the situation.
As president, I will take the hits.
is the expectation to be, I mean, if it is, that's probably good, but
You have to admit that you violated
yeah,
it.
to
and-
say that we've had 3 board members that violated Brown Act, and that would narrow it down pretty good,
Yeah.
because only 2 didn't. But I would think at that point that,
And we won't, and you have to basically say, we'll never do this again. Never do that again.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
I wasn't aware of the last part of it.
Yeah.
That you have to say you want, the apology, if you will.
yeah. Acknowledgement and
Okay.
But besides the allegation, is there, or of a Brown Act violation, is there like a self-reporting line? Like,
I think it's just personal responsibility.
yeah, there isn't a requirement for
Yeah.
self-reporting.
well, okay, now they're hypothetical.
Yeah.
So say we're at a kid's birthday party.
Is it mine? Is it mine? It's my birthday.
Yeah.
party.
It's Elliot's kids who just celebrated his birthday party at paintball. We're all at paintball. And
Yesterday.
where there's another parent who brings up a topic about some PGUSD topic, and the 3 of us happen to be there and we talk about it. Now, there are other families out there who see us in public, or not public, but at the party. So they could make an allegation, but to kind of jump ahead of it, what if you were like, we're gonna cure and correct this option? Or how would you go about that?
You don't have a Brown Act violation, but let's say Beth was at that party too, and she made the comment, and somebody says you violated the Brown Act. And they send you a demand to cure and correct. That's what you would be responding to. Then you'd have to go through this process. Let's say you didn't have a demand and you said, I want to get out in front of it so that I don't put ourselves. I think I wouldn't make a confessional about it. I would simply put it on the agenda and have that discussion in public session and then act on it.
And that's what I've done as a superintendent. Sometimes I'll say, we're gonna pull this item. And then bring it back again, not necessarily indicating that we've been accused of violating the Brown Act or anything, but
saying I'm gonna pull it.
Does that answer your question, Mike? Okay.
I think I can speak from experience when I say there are attorneys who are watching those things. For public agencies, like whether or not you're posting your agenda 72 hours ahead of the meeting. And it's not because it's a good or a bad law, but it is a law. So for transparency's sake, like we're supposed to be consistent in how we follow the rules and how, we apply the same rules to ourselves. So if there's something that's not predictable or consistent, then it kind of just begs more questions. So if we say the agenda's up 72 hours before a meeting, but it's inconsistent, maybe it's 48, maybe it's 36. For me as a concerned community member, I start to wonder, well, what else are they not really, being as mindful about or transparent about? So it's not necessarily like the actual Brown Act, you got 70 hours and not 72, but it's like kind of the questions that could come from like going down that road.
Thank you, Jen. That was good. Last hypothetical, and this leads into our last topic. Board member gets home late from a board meeting, is exhausted, wants to crash in bed, dropping their materials on the dining table. Board member's spouse, who is high on tidiness, picks up the materials in the morning to move them to the board member's desk and sees a report and recommendation regarding a student expulsion, and out of curiosity reads the report. Do we have this a Brown Act violation? Well, is there potential liability to the district? Is there potential liability to the board member? For sure.
Closed
For
session
sure.
material made public.
Yeah,
And everything.
because that information is not only protected by FERPA, it's highly confidential information that only board members should have access to, not their spouses, not their friends, not their kids, not their neighbors. So on the issue of liability, which was one of the topics we're going to touch on in the last few minutes. Under the Government Tort Claims Act, board members and public employees have 100% protection from liability when they're acting within the course and scope of their employment. So anything you do as a collective board and anything that your staff does in the course and scope of there's personal immunity, whether or not there may be liability for the institution, there's personal immunity. And there's a obligation for the public agency to defend and hold you harmless. Okay. So acting together, you've got complete 100% protection. Acting alone, you're on your own. So the board member who left the board agenda packet, if that situation happened, and I can tell you situations that do happen, that the board could say, we're not going to defend you because you were negligent and you caused us liability. Or the board could say, we will defend you. We'll protect you from that. It was an inadvertent error and we're going to protect you from your own negligence. You have discretion to do that, but you have discretion to also deny it. In other districts, I've had situations where board members intentionally go out and leak information to somebody, maybe to an employee who is subject to discipline, maybe just gossip, maybe negotiation strategies that were discussed in closed session, shared with the union people or just one teacher. That board member is not acting in the course and scope because it's not the course and scope to divulge confidential information and potentially to the detriment of the public agency. And I've seen boards tell colleagues on the board that if we get sued because of your misconduct on this board, we're going to turn around and seek indemnity from you. Okay. That usually gets board members' attention. But anything you do as a group, you're 100% protected from liability. Okay. There will not be any personal liability at all. with the exception and the sole exception, and that would never happen here, I am certain. There were boards that intentionally discriminated based on race. They were sued and they were found individually liable, even though they were acting collectively because it was a racist board. Okay. So intentional violations of state and federal laws by a board is going to eliminate protection. That's not going to happen here. But anything within your course and scope of employees or community members or citizens don't like it, you are 100% protected from liability.
Can I ask how that applies to our individual board member comments? Because we sit on the dais and we give our comments as a board member, but also they're as an individual board member stating my experience or my view, or, you know, how does that First Amendment versus like district liability?
Excellent question. Thank you for that. There actually is a separate section in the civil code that any comments you make in a board meeting, you are protected from defamation and liability. Because part of your job is to make public comments as a board. But if you were to go out on the street outside of a board meeting, and you said something defamatory or released some then you're on your own. So what you do together, you're protected. What you do on your own outside of the meetings, that's on you. So if a board member left the meeting and said, well, we got rid of that scoundrel superintendent finally, and that person was a crook from day one, that board member is going to be liable for defamation. Okay. There's actually a case. Yeah, thank you, Bev. There's a case, Baca versus Board of Education this is this woman who was a gadfly in a community. And she went to a school board meeting and she stood up at the board meeting, and there was an African-American assistant superintendent who she called an Oreo. There was a elementary school principal. This is literally true. Elementary school principal, she called a child molester, and he shouldn't be. Okay. They gavelled her down. She wouldn't sit down. They called the sheriff in and had her physically removed from the board meeting, and she sued. And the federal district court said she had a free speech right to say that.
Yes, that's why.
If she had said the same thing out on the street, she could have been sued for defamation. Saying in a board meeting, anything that's said in a public agency meeting or in court is protected from defamation. Yeah, it was outrageous. It was an absolutely outrageous case. The district chose not to appeal that decision, but this woman was just out of control, outrageous.
That woman was a board member, or she
No,
was a public commenter?
She was a citizen, and they gavelled her down, and they had the sheriff physically remove her from the board meeting. And the federal court said she had a right to be there and a right to make her comments, and those people couldn't sue her for defamation.
Which is why we see some of the behavior that we do see in board members. I mean, in board meetings. It's because they have the right of free speech.
Yeah.
Lewis has a question, but I'll follow him.
One more topic, and I think I clarified this with Carolyn, is that I won't stop I won't cut off the mic unless I get direction from the president. Right. I can't take any technical action. That's right. That's right. Right. Yeah, it's the board president who can control that. You can hold them to the 3 minutes, but when they're up there, if it's within your jurisdiction, they can talk about it. But only for 3 minutes.
And another question on that, what if I'm acting as board president in line, like if I'm at a public meeting representing the board, that still counts as,
Yes, you're representing the district and you're speaking on behalf. of
even if it's not during a board meeting, okay?
Right,
Then I can call people whatever I want.
right. Well, I don't know about that. And one of the roles that you have as board president is you're the spokesperson for the. Any other board member who would be speaking as an individual. Okay.
And those 3 minutes then, once the 3 minutes is up, if the president decides that the microphone should be cut, then that's okay to cut.
Yeah.
Because it has been,
Yeah.
do we have a microphone that cuts?
Online, I can mute them. Actually, I turn down their volume.
Okay.
But I think we want to notify people before we take any of those types of steps that their time is up and give them an opportunity to wrap up or not. And then go from there before we're.
You're a small district, but I've seen some boards have a light that goes on.
Do we have a
goes,
light?
Green, orange, red.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, and some people hold up signs that say 20 to 30 seconds. You can control that. And if you're going to do it uniformly, do it consistently. The problem districts have is when they don't do it. And then all of a sudden they start doing it and there's an upset. Okay. So if you haven't done it for 10 years, why are you doing it now? Or why are you doing it for me? Okay.
Yeah, we don't want the perception that some people's comments are valued more than other people's, depending on the perspective. So it even may be an opportunity for us to like create a script, so that we are mindful and empathetic, but also consistent with how we respond. Because like Laura was saying, this year is going to be, I think, an emotional year for people, and we're going to have to be aware and still be mindful that we have to be level-headed and making decisions.
Well, and I think that there's something to be said for like kindness counts.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
And so if there is a parent that's up there and they're expressing emotion, I mean, and somebody else is just, it's they're not affected as, as directly affected, fine. Kindness counts, like letting somebody go over their 3 minutes because they're sobbing about their child.
Ooh, I think it gets tricky because then if we have somebody who's like a person who comes to our meetings often and has comments that maybe aren't, we might view them differently. If I was the person who showed up and I was like the commenter who wasn't emotional, I would want my stuff to be kind of taken seriously. I don't know what the balance is, Laura, because I feel like it's tricky and it's like a case by case, but almost we don't want it to be case by case.
Well, I was going to say 2 quick comments on that. One is I probably would have a quick recess at that point. If it's really going on and they're sobbing, I would just say, thank you for your comments. Maybe we can have a quick break so we can do this. And then my second point I was going to say is I remember at one of the CSBA presentations, they were showing these students like how student voices matter. And these students were just saying the most amazing things. They got to their 3 minutes and the board president's like, your time is up. It's like, so like you have this, but that it gave me that respect for the president that even when the students are saying something that everyone wants to hear, you're holding them to that same standard.
Maybe you say, we really love what you're saying, but we have to.
Yes. Oh yeah. I know they said it very curtly, but I was just remember, I was like, wow, I don't know if I would have the chutzpah to do that. Yeah.
I think that's where the consistency comes in though. And even just having a script that, we talk about and we re-share at the beginning, it's that, reminder that everyone in the room is hearing the same thing. I've seen you do it already, Elliot. And, I remember Brian doing it last year where, it was really just, I think when we're talking about compassion and kindness, I'm so sorry, and we're hearing you, but really, your 3 minutes, are up. I think how we do it as well, can really speak to it. But I still think it comes back to addressing it and setting out the protocols and the norms at the beginning. So everyone in the room hears it, at the same time.
With those things, there's a perception of fairness, but it's not a legal issue. Is that right?
It's not a legal issue. No, it's a community relationship issue.
But legally, people have a right to public comment.
Absolutely.
What about restricting how much time you give people?
Yeah, that is allowed in the Brown Act. That you can set reasonable limits. I know one board that limits it to 2 minutes. This is probably the lowest I know of. And I know the same board that limits it to 2 says all public comments, whether on or off agenda topics, are going to take place in this. You can set the amount of time, 20-minute period at the beginning of the meeting. And then after that, now they had a problem in that community. That problem in the community was so divided, and there was a core group that was sabotaging their meeting. So they just said, okay, we're going to give this core group 20 minutes at the beginning of our meeting. They'll have their say, and then we're done, and we're going to go on to our agenda and no more public comment. So it's got to be reasonable, but it's usually in the context of what's going on in your community. 3 minutes is pretty standard. 5 minutes is the longest I know, and 2 minutes is the shortest I know.
I've also seen in that situation where you're gonna give 20 minutes, where, and this is cases where people have to give their docket to the clerk and so on. And so that's when I've seen, I'm gonna give my 3 minutes to so-and-so. That's when I've seen it most often.
But you can also not only limit individuals, you can limit the amount of time, total time.
Right.
So you can say 20 minutes of public comments, but I don't know, I know a few that do that, not a lot.
We do. We have a limit for
You
20
do?
minutes per public comment per agenda item, and then also public comment on non-agenda items. There's 20 minutes for that as well.
We have extended it in the past.
Right, and I
Yeah, I
think
think
when
it's
there are
something-
issues that come up, like Planned Parenthood or something where we know we're gonna be hearing from the community that night, it's a discussion topic worth having, you know?
Yeah, I mean, again, it just comes back to that consistency is do we
Yep.
want to say we're going to do the 20 minutes and everyone who's here, like, we please submit your comments to the, but
Well-
it is a really tough one.
And then at that point, we vote on it.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
someone makes a motion, someone seconds, and we vote on it. If it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. So,
I think that night, though, just referencing when we
Yeah.
knew we had quite a few there. I mean, it actually worked well, but I think Brian did a good job at the beginning of kind of reminding everyone we have 20 minutes total. So please, sort of, gauge your comments. And it really did get to the point, where if it was everything was being said, on one side of things, right, to kind of remind everyone if there's something else that different to what's been said already, and really kind of putting up to the public a little to sort of gauge, how they want to use those remaining, minutes within that 20-minute frame. But yeah, I think that worked well that night. I remember.
We have come upon the witching hour.
Mhm.
Where would you all like to go at this point?
home,
Second, no. Just out of curiosity, what is left on the items that
There
we
was-
proposed?
Activity we were gonna do, but
Quite happy to really skip and we can save for next time. How about that? Yes. And then really the parking lot items, I think we want to maybe just go through what we have on that list and, just be sure we've captured everything, right, for future sessions.
couple things that I wrote down on my notes on just the parking lot. That were comments the board members made that I thought you want to revisit. One was the handbook, and the revisions of the handbook and the modifications, and I think we've talked about that. The other thing I heard was a discussion of methods of achieving consensus, and when consensus is not achieved, what do you do? How do you handle that? And the review of the top 10 norms. Those were the three things that I had written.
Your other thoughts, comments? Turn it over to you.
I think the only other piece, thank you, both. The only piece I would like to add to that is I've given you all a copy of the Governance Core 2.0 book. So it is the most, sort of current and revised version of the Governance Core 1.0. Recently, just revised. This was actually spoken about and really referenced a lot in the new trustee orientation session that I attended with both Beth and Mike back in December at CSBA in Anaheim. And really facilitators and presenters for that day took a lot of the information from, this particular book. So I would like to propose, that this is something that really sort of guides some of our sessions in the coming months. And for our next session, if, everyone doesn't feel it's too much, but I really feel as I'm reading through exactly what those, first sort of 30 pages are and topics, it really aligns nicely with the review you're going to be doing of the handbook. And you'll probably see as you're going through the handbook, that even just the topics that are in there in the index at the beginning, it really aligns nicely with the same titles that you're going to see referenced here. So if everyone is in agreement with that, my proposal is to really read through the introduction, politics, governance, and system improvement, and the first topic 1, moral imperative and the governance core. So essentially pages 1 to 28 by our next session. And then, we can really sort of embed, something in there as far as a discussion and how that's tying into the work that we're doing. How does everyone feel about that?
Can we
Is that
add
doable?
the homework though on just the revisions, or would you rather save the homework of the revisions for after we read the 28 pages?
I think we could do them together, right? I feel that reading this
feel
is
like we
going to
need
help
both.
guide, I think, some of your revisions that you're going to do in the handbook, right? They go in
Yeah, I
tandem,
think together.
right?
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, we have homework.
Look at that. We're being
Honors.
efficient. Laura's already found something. Oh my goodness. All right, so pages 1 through 29 will be sort of a homework, right? And then, of course, yes, homework to really review the handbook and present. And I'll give sort of a deadline for that, maybe a week prior, and I'll do reminders in our trustee updates as to when we'll want that in. And I think the other piece will be, yes, we want to identify the date for our next session, which I will connect with. We can move on. Yeah. So that's that. I just want to thank you all for coming tonight with such open hearts and minds to really just, I think, listen to one another and, receive the information in such a, I think, insightful and thoughtful manner. And each one of you, I'm so grateful for just the input and the feedback you've brought. The questions you asked are just, so how many times did I hear both of you going, wow, that's an excellent question. So again, just indicative of so the commitment and dedication you've given to this process. Unity of purpose. I keep coming back to that unity of purpose. And where we started too, right? We go from I to we without losing me. And that's really what this is about, right? All of you really sort of committing to working together as a team and coming to an agreement on how you conduct your business in public, right? Because it starts with us. Our entire community and district is looking to us for the example. We are the models of what we expect from everyone down to our students. And so it starts with us. So just thank you for coming with just such excellence when it comes to that. Appreciate you all and appreciate you, Eric and Lou, for being alongside us in this journey and just sharing your wisdom and insight. So thank you. Thank you, Angela and Lewis, for being here tonight as well, for getting everything ready. We're grateful for you. Dinner was wonderful. And Lewis, I know, keeping us, online with the talk. Have a lovely evening, everyone.
Wait.